Alara always loved the city's hum. The constant thrum of traffic, the distant wail of sirens, the murmur of 1,000 conversations. It was her symphony. I, on the other hand, preferred the quiet rustle of leaves in our little garden, the gentle chirping of birds at dawn. We were a study in contrasts, a carefully curated balance of opposing forces. Or so I thought. Lately, the city's hum seemed to have seeped into her bones, vibrating within her even when she was home. Her eyes, usually soft and focused on me, now held a distant gleam, as if she were listening to a frequency I couldn't hear. She'd sit by the window for hours, not reading, not working, just listening. I'd ask her what she was thinking about, and she'd smile vaguely, a Mona Lisa smile that revealed nothing. Just the city, she'd say, her voice a little too breathy, a little too high. Started subtly. A new scarf, a different perfume, a late night at the office that turned into 2, then 3. I told myself I was being paranoid. Alara was a successful architect. Demanding projects were part of the job. But the change wasn't just in her schedule. It was in her very essence. She was lighter somehow, as if a weight had been lifted. But the weight wasn't gone. It had shifted. It was no longer the comfortable weight of shared life, but the unsettling lightness of something missing. One evening, I came home early, a surprise bouquet of her favorite lilies in hand. The apartment was empty, but not in the usual way. There was a residue, not of another person, not exactly, but of something else. An energy, like the air after a thunderstorm, charged and unsettling. The lilies felt heavy in my hand, their sweet scent suddenly cloying. I placed them on the kitchen counter, their white petals a stark contrast against the dark granite. I walked to the window, the city's hum a low thrum beneath the silence of our apartment. I looked out at the maze of lights, each one a tiny story unfolding. And for the first time I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cool evening air. It was the chill of the unknown, the creeping suspicion that the city wasn't just Alara's symphony. It was her secret. I started noticing the absences. Not physical absences, though those were becoming more frequent too, but absences within her presence. We'd be having dinner, and her eyes would glaze over, her smile fading as if someone had flipped a switch. Or we'd be watching a movie, her hand in mine, but her touch would be lifeless, her fingers cold. It was as if a part of her was always elsewhere, tuned into a different channel. And then there was the scent. It wasn't a perfume, not exactly. It was more like an imprint, a faint, lingering scent of something unfamiliar, something that clung to her skin, her hair, her clothes. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but it was there. A phantom scent, a ghost of another presence. I found myself becoming obsessed with it. I'd bury my face in her scarf when she wasn't around, inhaling deeply, trying to decipher the notes. Was it sandalwood? Musk? Something metallic like rain on hot asphalt? I couldn't place it, and the not knowing was driving me mad. One night, I woke up to find her sleepwalking. Her eyes were open, but unseeing, her body moving with a strange, fluid grace. She walked to the window, her gaze fixed on the city lights, and whispered something I couldn't understand. It was a language I didn't recognize, a melody both alluring and terrifying. I watched her, my heart pounding in my chest, until she turned and walked back to bed, her eyes fluttering closed as she slipped back into sleep. The next morning, I confronted her. "You were sleepwalking last night," I said, my voice trembling. She looked at me, her eyes wide and innocent. "Was I? I didn't realize. You were talking in your sleep," I pressed, saying things I didn't understand. She frowned. "I don't remember. Must have been a dream." I wanted to believe her. I needed to believe her. But the scent lingered, a silent accusation in the air. And the city's hum, once a background noise, now seemed to pulse with a sinister rhythm. It was as if the city itself was whispering secrets in her ear. Secrets I wasn't meant to hear. I started following her. Not in the traditional sense, with trench coats and hidden cameras. My pursuit was more subtle, a digital shadowing. I checked her phone records, her emails, her browser history. I knew it was an invasion of privacy, but the need to know, to understand, was overwhelming. There was nothing concrete, no smoking gun. Just a series of seemingly innocuous interactions. Late-night texts from an unknown number, cryptic messages on social media, searches for art galleries and cafes in obscure parts of the city. It was a trail of breadcrumbs, leading me deeper into a labyrinth of doubt and suspicion. One evening, I followed her physically. She told me she was working late, but I had a feeling she was lying. I trailed her to a dimly lit bar in a part of town I rarely visited. I watched from across the street as she met with a man, not particularly handsome or charming, but with an intensity in his eyes that mirrored the distant gleam in hers. They didn't touch, didn't even flirt in the conventional sense. But the air between them crackled with an intimacy that was more profound than any physical contact. They talked for hours, their heads bent close together, their voices low and conspiratorial. I watched them, my heart a leaden weight in my chest, as they shared something I couldn't access, a connection that excluded me. It wasn't a sexual betrayal, not in the way I had always imagined. It was something more insidious, a betrayal of the spirit, of the shared world we had built together. It was as if she had found a doorway to another dimension, a dimension where I didn't exist. And the worst part was, she seemed to prefer it there. The city became a battleground. Every corner held a potential memory, every street a possible rendezvous point. I found myself retracing her steps, haunting the places she frequented, searching for clues, for answers, for some tangible evidence of her betrayal. But the city was a master of disguise, a shapeshifter that constantly morphed and rearranged itself. Familiar landmarks seemed distorted, imbued with a sinister significance. The cafes where we used to share coffee now felt like crime scenes. The parks where we strolled hand in hand now seemed like hiding places. My perception of reality began to unravel. I saw her everywhere, in the crowds, in the reflections, in the shadows. Every woman with her hair color, her gait, her style of dress became a potential double, a phantom Alara haunting my waking hours. I started losing time. Hours would disappear, swallowed by the city's labyrinthine streets. I'd find myself standing in front of a building, unable to remember how I got there, my mind a blank slate. The line between reality and delusion blurred, and I began to question my own sanity. One afternoon, I saw her walking down the street, arm in arm with the man from the bar. They were laughing, their faces animated, their bodies close. I followed them, my heart pounding in my chest, until they disappeared into a nondescript building. I waited outside for hours, my anger simmering, my mind racing. When they finally emerged, it was dusk. They walked in silence, their faces somber, their steps heavy. As they parted ways, I saw a flicker of sadness in her eyes, a fleeting moment of vulnerability. It was then that I realized the truth. She wasn't happy. This other world, this other life wasn't bringing her joy. It was a distraction, an escape, a desperate attempt to fill a void. But what was the void? And why couldn't I fill it? The realization that Alara was unhappy, that her clandestine life was not a source of joy but a symptom of some deeper dissatisfaction, shifted the ground beneath my feet. My anger, which had been a burning inferno, began to cool, leaving behind a residue of sadness and confusion. I looked at myself in the mirror, really looked, for the first time in months. The reflection staring back at me was a stranger. My eyes were hollow, my skin pale, my features drawn. The man I saw was a ghost of the man I used to be, a man consumed by suspicion and jealousy. Had I become the monster in this story? Had my obsession with Alara's secret life blinded me to her pain, to the cracks that had appeared in our own connection? The city, once a symbol of her betrayal, now seemed to reflect my own failings, my own inability to see beyond the surface. I started noticing things I had overlooked before. The way she'd flinch when I touched her, the way her smile wouldn't quite reach her eyes, the way she'd avoid my gaze. These were not the signs of a woman reveling in a secret affair, but of a woman trapped in a cage of her own making. The question was, how had we gotten here? When had the vibrant tapestry of our love begun to fray? Where had the threads of our connection come undone? The answers, I knew, lay not in the city's shadowy corners, but in the quiet spaces between us, in the unspoken words and the unacknowledged hurts that had accumulated over time. The mirror, once a source of self-reflection, now seemed to mock me with its fragmented image. It showed me not just the physical toll of my obsession, but the deeper fissures in my own soul, the cracks that threatened to shatter the foundation of my being. I had to find a way to mend these cracks, to rebuild the shattered pieces of myself, before it was too late. I stopped following Alara. I deleted the tracking apps. I ignored the late-night messages. I turned a blind eye to the lingering scents. Instead, I focused on us. I started cooking her favorite meals, planning weekend getaways, leaving her little love notes around the apartment. At first, she was wary, her eyes filled with suspicion. But slowly, gradually, the walls she had erected around herself began to crumble. She started smiling more, her touch became warmer, her gaze lingered a little longer. One evening, as we were sitting on the balcony, watching the city lights twinkle in the distance, she turned to me, her eyes filled with tears. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. "For what?" I asked, my voice gentle. "For everything," she said, her voice breaking. "For the distance, the lies, the other life." I took her hand, my thumb stroking her knuckles. "It's okay," I said. "We all make mistakes." "But I hurt you," she said, her voice filled with remorse. "Yes, you did," I said. "But I hurt you too. I neglected you, ignored your needs, took you for granted." We sat in silence for a long time, the city's hum a distant lullaby. It was the first time we had truly listened to each other, without accusations, without defenses. It was the first step towards healing, towards rebuilding the trust we had broken. The city, once a source of noise and distraction, now seemed to hold its breath, as if giving us space to breathe, to reconnect, to find our way back to each other. In the silence of the city, we found the silence within ourselves, the quiet space where love could finally bloom again. Forgiveness, I discovered, is a long and winding road. Even as Alara and I rebuilt our connection, the ghost of her betrayal lingered, a phantom limb that twitched unexpectedly, causing spasms of doubt and insecurity. I found myself scrutinizing her every move, analyzing her every word, searching for hidden meanings, for subtle signs of deception. The city, once a silent witness, now seemed to whisper reminders of her past transgressions, its every corner a potential trigger for my anxieties. The man from the bar, the phantom lover, haunted my thoughts. I imagined their conversations, their shared laughter, their unspoken intimacy. I pictured them in cafes, in galleries, in hidden corners of the city, their connection a constant threat to my fragile peace of mind. Even in moments of intimacy, the shadow of doubt lingered. As I held Alara in my arms, I couldn't help but wonder if she was truly present, or if a part of her was still lost in that other world, that other life. The city, once a source of shared experiences, now seemed to divide us. It was her domain, the place where she had sought solace and escape, while I remained tethered to our home, our sanctuary, our fragile bubble of shared reality. I knew I couldn't live like this, trapped in a cycle of suspicion and resentment. I had to find a way to let go of the past, to exorcise the phantom lover, to reclaim the city as our own. But how? How could I erase the memories, the doubts, the lingering pain? One evening, while sorting through some old boxes, I stumbled upon a collection of Alara's early sketches. They were beautiful, intricate drawings of buildings, bridges, and cityscapes, each one imbued with her unique vision and creativity. As I flipped through the pages, I noticed a recurring motif. A hidden door, a secret passage, a concealed room. It was a subtle detail, almost imperceptible, but it was there in every drawing. A hidden world within a world, a secret life concealed beneath the surface. I realized then that Alara's betrayal wasn't just a product of her circumstances. It was an expression of her very nature. She was an architect, a builder of worlds, and she had created a world for herself that excluded me. The city, with its labyrinthine streets and hidden corners, was the perfect canvas for her deception. It offered her anonymity, freedom, and the illusion of control. She could be anyone she wanted to be, live any life she desired, without fear of judgment or consequence. But the city was also a mirror, reflecting her own inner turmoil, her own longing for something more. Her betrayal wasn't just a rejection of me, it was a rejection of the life we had built together, the life that had become too predictable, too comfortable, too ordinary. I understood then that I couldn't compete with the city, with the allure of the unknown, the excitement of the forbidden. I had to offer her something different, something deeper, something that would resonate with her soul. But what? What could I offer her that the city couldn't? The answer, I knew, lay not in grand gestures or extravagant promises, but in the simple act of listening, of understanding, of truly seeing her, the woman behind the mask, the architect of her own deception. I began to study Alara, not with the suspicion of a detective, but with the curiosity of an explorer charting unknown territory. I observed her habits, her moods, the subtle shifts in her expression, the nuances in her voice. I listened to her stories, her dreams, her fears, trying to decipher the map of her heart. I discovered a woman of contradictions, a complex tapestry of strength and vulnerability, ambition and insecurity, passion and longing. I saw the child in her eyes when she spoke of her childhood dreams, the artist in her hands when she sketched her designs, the lover in her touch when she reached for me in the night. I realized that I had only ever seen a part of her, the part she had chosen to reveal, the carefully constructed facade she presented to the world. The city had allowed her to shed this facade, to explore the hidden corners of her soul, to express the parts of herself she had kept hidden. But the city had also led her astray, tempting her with false promises, luring her into a labyrinth of shadows and illusions. I had to find a way to bring her back, to show her that the true adventure lay not in the anonymity of the city, but in the intimacy of our connection. I started creating my own map, not of the city, but of our shared world. I marked the places where we had met, the places where we had fallen in love, the places where we had shared our dreams and our fears. I traced the lines of our connection, the invisible threads that bound us together, the shared history that had shaped our lives. I knew that this map was incomplete, that there were still parts of Alara I didn't know, parts of myself I hadn't yet discovered. But I also knew that this was the journey we were meant to take together, a journey of exploration, of discovery, of rediscovering the love that had been lost in the city's maze. My understanding of Alara's betrayal shifted. It wasn't simply an act of infidelity, but a desperate yearning for expression, for a space where she could be fully herself, complexities and contradictions laid bare. The city, with its anonymity and endless possibilities, had provided that space, albeit a temporary and illusory one. I decided to reclaim the city not as a battleground, but as a canvas. I would use its energy, its vibrancy, its very essence, to paint a new portrait of our love, a love that embraced the shadows and the light, the known and the unknown. I started planning surprises, not the conventional kind, but experiences designed to awaken her senses, to challenge her perceptions, to remind her of the magic that still existed between us. I arranged a private tour of a hidden rooftop garden, overlooking the city skyline. I booked a secret concert in an abandoned warehouse, filled with the sounds of her favorite musicians. I left cryptic clues leading to a clandestine art exhibition, showcasing the work of artists who explored themes of identity and transformation. Each experience was a brushstroke, adding depth and texture to our renewed connection. The city, once a source of alienation, became a playground for our rediscovered intimacy. We explored its hidden corners, its secret gardens, its forgotten histories, together. The city's hum, once a reminder of her betrayal, now became the soundtrack to our love story, a symphony of shared experiences, a testament to the resilience of our bond. The city, once her escape, now became our sanctuary, a place where we could be fully ourselves, together. Reclaiming the city was one thing, rebuilding trust was another. It was a slow, painstaking process, like sculpting a delicate figure from fragile clay. Each touch had to be gentle, each movement deliberate, lest the whole structure crumble. I started with small gestures. A cup of coffee in bed, a spontaneous back rub, a handwritten note tucked into her lunch bag. I made a conscious effort to listen, really listen, to her words, her silences, the unspoken language of her heart. I learned to recognize the subtle cues, the fleeting expressions that revealed her inner state. I learned to anticipate her needs, to offer comfort without intrusion, to provide space without distance. Slowly, tentatively, she began to respond. The walls she had erected around herself started to come down, brick by brick, revealing the vulnerable woman beneath. She started sharing her dreams, her fears, her doubts, the things she had kept hidden for so long. I held her close, not with the possessiveness of a jealous lover, but with the tenderness of a confidant, a witness to her journey. I offered her not judgment, but understanding, not control, but freedom. The trust we were building was not the naive trust of the early days, but a deeper, more mature trust, forged in the fires of betrayal and forgiveness. It was a trust that acknowledged the complexities of human nature, the fragility of love, the constant need for renewal and reaffirmation. The city, once a symbol of our broken trust, now became a testament to its resilience. It was a reminder that even in the midst of chaos and uncertainty, love could find a way to bloom, to heal, to transform. Even as trust began to blossom between us, a new unease settled in my heart. It wasn't the burning anger of betrayal, nor the gnawing fear of loss. It was a subtler, more insidious feeling, a sense of imbalance, of shifting sands beneath my feet. Alara, once hesitant and withdrawn, now radiated a newfound confidence, a sense of self-possession that both intrigued and unsettled me. She moved through the city with a newfound grace, her eyes sparkling with a vitality I hadn't seen in years. She spoke of new projects, new collaborations, new possibilities that stretched beyond the confines of our shared world. She was expanding, evolving, becoming someone I didn't fully recognize. While I celebrated her growth, a part of me felt left behind, stranded on the shore as she sailed towards new horizons. The city, once our shared canvas, now seemed to belong to her, its energy fueling her transformation, leaving me in its wake. I found myself questioning my own identity, my own purpose. Who was I in this new equation? Was I the anchor that held her back, or the wind that filled her sails? Was I the architect of our shared world, or merely a passenger on her journey? The city, once a source of connection, now seemed to highlight the growing distance between us. It was a constant reminder of her independence, her self-sufficiency, her ability to thrive without me. I knew I couldn't hold her back, couldn't stifle her growth. But how could I reconcile my love for her with this newfound fear of losing her, of becoming irrelevant in her ever-expanding world? Alara's world was expanding, while mine seemed to be shrinking. She was a kaleidoscope of vibrant colors, constantly shifting and evolving, while I felt like a faded photograph, a static image frozen in time. Her work consumed her, her passion ignited by the city's energy. She spoke of late-night meetings, weekend workshops, collaborations with artists and architects from around the globe. Her phone buzzed with messages, her calendar filled with appointments, her life a whirlwind of activity. I tried to keep up, to be a part of her world, but I felt like an outsider, a spectator watching a play unfold on a distant stage. The city, once a source of shared experiences, now seemed to exclude me, its language foreign, its rhythms unfamiliar. I found myself spending more and more time alone, wandering the streets, haunted by the echo of her absence. I visited the places we used to frequent, the cafes, the galleries, the parks, but they were empty without her. Their charm faded, their magic gone. The city, once a symbol of our connection, now mocked me with its indifference. It was a vast, impersonal landscape, indifferent to my pain, my loneliness, my longing for the woman who was slipping away from me. I tried to talk to Alara, to express my fears, my insecurities, but the words wouldn't come. How could I explain this feeling of being left behind, of being overshadowed by her brilliance, her passion, her ever-expanding world. The city, once a source of hope, now seemed to whisper a prophecy of loss. It was a reminder that everything changes, that nothing stays the same, that even the strongest bonds can fray and break under the pressure of time and circumstance.